What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another amazing Naruto story. What if villagers attacked on Naruto? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. I ran as fast as my 3-year-old legs would carry me. Around the endless labyrinth of alleyways and through shady streets. I ran for what seemed like an eternity. My chest burning at my labored breaths. Heart racing, feet aching, angry mob of armed villagers behind me. Until I reached the dead end. I turned to run out through the way I came. Hoping I could dig myself out of the hole I'd gotten myself into. Hoping I could find a way to undo my mistake. But as I turned around, the hope I had started to believe in faded away. Because as I turned around I was greeted with the snarling faces of the people I shared a village with. Their faces filled with pure hate and unchecked rage, dying to be set free. I screamed as the monsters descended, kunai and other harmful objects in hand. I heard the bones break under my skin. Saw as the blood stained my previously white shirt the dark shade of crimson. They beat me until the pain became numb. Beat me till my hearing was all but gone. Beat me until my screaming lessened. And then beat me some more to make my screaming louder. As they beat me they would shout things like, demon, monster, murderer, disgrace, and other things too horrific to be repeated. Once the pain finally numbed I stopped screaming and crying out for them to stop. They grew tired of beating an unreactive victim. One of the men of the mob grabbed me by my blonde hair and yanked me up to face them. I blinked. The world was going fuzzy as I struggled to stay conscious. He lifted a kunai to my face and drew 3 whisker marks on each cheek. His mouth was moving but all I could hear was a loud ringing. The man then lifted the kunai to my eyes. It was too late when I processed what was going on. He sliced the kunai over my eyes. Little did I know this would be the last thing I'd see. I awoke inside of what appeared to be some sort of sewer. A deep, demonic voice beckoned me, calling to me in the maze of pathways. I followed it in a half-conscious trance, not having any control over my body or actions. After I had gone through what seemed like infinite passages I finally reached a cage. The cage's doors were bronze and seemed to have no end and no beginning. As I looked closer I noticed a large seal placed in between what looked to be its doors, sealing them shut. I walked through the bars of the cage. Through the dim light I saw a glowing red eye open. I tried to run back through the bars of the cage realizing what, or who, was in front of me. A huge, clawed paw blocked my way. I had no chance of escaping. Why are you running, Gaki? The voice growled menacingly. Because. Why you are the Kyubi no Kitsune. Why you had attacked the village hidden in the leaves the day I was born, I stuttered, completely and utterly fearing for my life. And why you killed my parents, I muttered under my breath. Gaki, the day I attacked the village I was being controlled by a user of the Sharingan. I didn't know who because he was wearing a mask. I did not want to destroy the village and I didn't want to kill your parents. Before you I was sealed inside of your mother Kushina Uzumaki. I quite liked your mother, she was caring and always happy. Your father sealed me inside of you with the cost of his life to protect the village. He wanted the villagers to treat you as a hero but it seems they cannot see the difference between a sealing scroll and a kunai. This information shocked me. What do you mean my father sealed you inside of me? Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage, sealed you inside of me. I said, confusion spreading to every part of me. Yes, well, Gaki, the 4th Hokage is your father. I was so shocked I didn't notice the huge paw lifting me, so I was eye to eye with the magnificent fox, tails billowing behind it. What is why your N name? I stuttered meekly. The fox looked shocked. It was the first human emotion I had seen on the fox. No one has ever asked me for my name before. My name is Kurama the 9-tailed fox. Gaki, you need to wake up now. The 3rd Hokage needs to talk to you. But will we be able to talk still, Kurama? Of course, Gaki. We will be able to talk in your mindscape. I smiled at Kurama as my vision started to blur and fade away. I awoke in a room. There was a beeping noise in the corner. I could feel wires and tubes sticking out of me. My eyes were open but everything was dark. I heard movement on the opposite side of the room. Who's there? I rasped, barely above a whisper. Naruto. I heard a shout from who I could only assume was the 3rd Hokage. Gigi? I asked, confused. Why can't I see? I asked, confusion and fear covering my features. They tried as hard as they could to save your eyes. But it was too late. Memories of the attack flooded through me. I started to cry. Sarutobi tried to comfort me, but I flinched away from his touch, pain searing through me due to the broken bones and internal bleedings. It's a miracle that I'm still alive, I thought. Yes, Gaki. I have been gifted with immortality, and that means that you will have the power of immortality to a certain extent. That explains it, I thought. I'm so sorry, Naruto, the third Hokage said sadly. It's okay, Gigi. It's not your fault, I said, hoping to cheer up the man who has protected me since birth from the onslaught of the villagers. Kit, I can train you if you want. I will be able to train your senses so that you will not need your eyes. Yes, please, Kurama, I replied excitedly, grinning from ear to ear. The Hokage noticed me grinning and became confused. Naruto, why are you smiling? The Hokage asked curiously. Because, Gigi, Kurama has agreed to train me. Who is Kurama, Naruto? The Hokage asked worriedly. The Kyuubi no Kitsune. Kurama was telling me about how the fourth Hokage and Lady Kushina were my parents. You know, Gigi, Kurama is really nice. The Hokage was making weird strangling noises, and I was imagining him gaping like a fish. The Hokage was struggling for words. I giggled at the Hokage's struggle for words. A wave of exhaustion washed over me. I yawned. The Hokage tucked me into the bed and wished me sweet dreams. Then I fell asleep. The third Hokage left me in the care of two Anbu. Anbu Dog and Anbu Weasel. They agreed to train me in between missions. Kurama began by teaching me basic jutsus like shadow clones, substitution, henge, and a few jutsus from each chakra type. Kurama figured out that I possessed each chakra nature by looking into my DNA. He then got me to create a blood clone and a shadow clone. Kurama decided that if he was going to train me, he would have to physically be with me in his human form. Kurama then took control of my shadow clone and transformed it into him. Kurama showed me in my mindscape what the clone transformed into. The clone grew to the size of a 15-year-old. It had dark red hair with burnt orange streaks in it. The whisker marks on his cheeks had darkened. His eyes were blood red and had slits for pupils. He smiled at me, revealing his slightly elongated fangs. He had two fluffy fox ears atop his head that at the base were a dark orange color and faded into white. He had one large fluffy tail behind him that matched his ears. Kurama then explained to me that I can communicate with the blood clone whenever I wanted to through my mindscape, and that blood clones, unlike shadow clones, cannot be dispelled unless the user manually does it or dies. Due to the nature of the jutsu, all experiences had by the clone will automatically be passed on to me, which will mean everything that happens to the clone will pass itself onto me, such as relationships and feeling towards different people. This clone will be left in the village to be trained by the Anbu assigned to look after and train me. Kurama told me that he knew some people who would be willing to assist in training me. Time skipped 3 days. We were all packed and preparing to leave the village under the cover of night. The blood clone was in my bed fast asleep and snoring quietly. Kurama beckoned me towards the open window and into the night that awaited us. We jumped across rooftops as we quickly and silently made our way to the village exit. As we reached it, I turned back and faced the village I had spent the first 3 years of my life in. The village that had tormented me and beaten me to the brink of death. The village that had maimed me and left me permanently blind. The village that had shunned me because of things out of my control. I looked in the direction of the stone faces of the previous Hokage. I sent out waves of chakra so that I could see them, paying extra attention to the face of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, my father. I pictured him and my mother looking down on me from wherever you go after death. I pictured them smiling and urging me to go on and fulfill my life. Hey, Naruto, let's go, Kurama said, beckoning me in the direction we must go. Okay, Kurama, lead the way, I replied. I knew that I wouldn't be in the village for years while I was away training. This didn't faze me in the least. I heard Kurama's footsteps running off, and so I followed behind him, running to catch up. I am not going to describe the whole training trip because I can't be arsed, but I will write the summary below. Summary of training. Kurama and Naruto tracked down the legendary Sannin and trained for 3 years with each separate one. Orochimaru in this FIC isn't a bad guy. In this time Naruto grew very close to each them and formed a family-like bond. Meanwhile in the village, Naruto's blood clone had been training with the Anbu Dog and Weasel. aka Kakashi and Itachi, who doesn't perform a clan massacre in this fic. During this training period, Naruto became very close to them, forming a brother-like bond with each of them. Because of the way the blood clone jutsu worked, Naruto will feel strongly towards them and know them very well when he returns to the village. Because of the combined training from the Sannin and the Anbu, Naruto had heightened his senses so much that he could surpass many Junin and Anbu without sight. In the village, when Naruto's blood clone turned 5, the Hokage allowed him to go to the academy to learn how to become a ninja. Naruto was always top of his class, but most of the students disliked him. Their parents told them to stay away from Naruto, calling him a demon and a monster. This led to Naruto being regarded as a lesser being and his peers bullying him. The students would beat Naruto and Naruto would sit there and take every punch as they pummeled him into the dirt. Naruto could tell who they were even though he couldn't see them, as it was always the same group of people. The bullies are irrelevant to the story, so they aren't any of the Rookie 9. The experience Naruto gets through the bullying is though. Naruto remained out of the village training until he turned 12 when he returns in time for the Genin test. I returned to the village with Kurama after 9 years. Over this time I had learned lots of new jutsus and I even had some Kekkei Genkei, so sorry if I spelt this wrong. I had training in ninjutsu, genjutsu, kenjutsu and taijutsu. I wore weights around my legs and arms now for training purposes, weights similar to Lee's but a bit heavier. My appearance had changed too. I had grown my hair to waist length and tied it with a blood red ribbon at the top of my head. While we were training, Kurama told me that I needed a new look, and so now, instead of the horrible orange jumpsuit, I wear some shorts and a top that cuts off below my chest. I think I look like a girl, but Kurama thinks I look nice, so I'll take his word for it. The blood clone I left behind has grown its hair but hasn't changed its outfit. I continued to walk through the village in the direction of my home. Kurama was beside me but had a genjutsu over his ears and tail. As we walked, people kept staring at me. I could sense them even though I couldn't see them. I arrived at my house. The blood clone was still asleep even though it was late and it needed to go to the academy to take the Genin exam. I dispelled the jutsu and quickly leapt out the window and jumped from roof to roof so that I could make it on time. As I was taking my seat at the back of the class, the bell rang signaling class to start. I heard gasps as people walked into the room. People started whispering things like, "Who is she?" and "She is really pretty." Iruka walked into the room and started calling names to track attendance. He got to my name and I replied to the shock of the class. Time skipped to the exam. My name was called and I made my way to the room for the exam. The instructors were Iruka and Mizuki, who kept looking at me funny. Iruka's sensei told me that I had to produce at least 3 clones to pass. I decided to showcase my abilities and produce 5 clones, one of each chakra nature. Iruka was stunned. So stunned he didn't say anything. Mizuki looked very much the same. I saw them make fish-like expressions by sending out waves of chakra. After about 5 minutes of this, Iruka finally told me that I had passed and that I could go and collect a headband. I walked out giggling, recalling the looks on their faces. I went and sat back at my seat. Most of the class were quiet now, but I could still hear the occasional whisper. Iruka came back to congratulate us on passing the exam, then he dismissed us. As I was walking along the corridors on my way home, someone came from behind me and pinned me up against the wall. They had a hold on my collar and were holding me up so I couldn't reach the floor. I was rather short for a 12-year-old boy, which meant he didn't have to lift me far. The person got really close to my face and started whispering threats and abuse into my ears. His entourage weren't far behind him. Most of them were snickering and adding on to the threats. The threats didn't really scare me, so I didn't react. The person pinning me to the wall leant in even closer to my ear and told me, "You are nothing. You are useless and pathetic. Why don't you just go crawl somewhere and die, you demon?" It was at that moment that I snapped, kicking the person in front of me 2-footed in the stomach. They went flying across the hallway, crashing into the wall. The members of his group turned to me with looks of terror. I could tell because their chakra spiked in the way it does when emotions change. I looked at each one individually, scaring them all more. I heard movement as the one I kicked across the room, who I could only assume was their leader, began to hoist himself up, using the wall for support. I turned to him slowly, his terror turning into absolute dread. He was petrified. Just as he was about to say something, I took a step in his direction. He took off running down the hall, which led to the rest of his group to flee as well. I laughed to myself as I heard their desperate attempt to open the door and exit. They kept fumbling with the handle, and that only made their attempts pointless. The handles on the academy doors were designed in a way that it takes a while to open them to stop other ninja from opposing nations to come and kidnap the students for ransom. Or even worse, kill them to eliminate future generations of ninja, which would weaken the village and effectively the nation. The locks had a design feature to make a lot of noise if opened hastily, so they would alert the teachers in case of an emergency. This was also an advantage to me because I knew which exit they went to without using a single ounce of chakra. Not that I wouldn't have been able to find them to begin with. I slowly started to approach them. Suddenly all of the things my blood clone went through by their hand flooded through my body. A psychotic and deranged smile appeared on my mouth. At this point all of the people in their group shrieked, fearing for their lives, wishing they hadn't chosen me to bully. I finally reached them, my smile growing all the more. I located the leader by finding his chakra amongst all the other chakra signatures. I looked directly into the leader's eyes, grabbing him by the collar of his shirt and pinning him up. His group by then had finally opened the door and had run off, abandoning their leader. I leant in close to the leader's ear and whispered, "Oh goody, now I have a hunt." He shivered, fear freezing him like a statue. Please don't hurt me. I'll do whatever you want, just please don't hurt me. Please." His words began to become more desperate as he begged me to spare him. My eyes narrowed at this, demonic smile dropping from my features, leaving my face a picture of hate. Who gave you the right to beg for forgiveness and mercy after all you have put me, and others before me, through? Who gave you the audacity to believe you had a choice in the matter? I hissed the words and he became all the more scared, if that was even possible. However, he lit up at this. "There is one thing you can do," I said slyly. "Yes, anything," he replied eagerly. "You can swear that you will never hurt me or anyone, and I mean anyone, again." "Yes, of course, just please don't hurt me." I let him go, and just as he was about to open the door he muttered, "Crazy, psychotic demon," under his breath, thinking I wouldn't hear him. Just as I was about to turn to him he fled out the door. The door slammed shut in his wake. Some movement caught my attention as Kurama came out from behind a locker. "That was intense, Kit," I sighed in response, looking down sadly. "I wasn't going to actually hurt him. I just wanted to teach him a lesson," I said in response. "It's okay, Gaki. I didn't think you would actually hurt him, no matter how badly he deserved to be. You aren't the type to hurt the weak and defenseless." I sighed again. "Now come on, Gaki, let's go home." We made our way home, but in the way stopped at the market to pick up ingredients for dinner. We arrived home and ate dinner in silence. A surprising fact about Kurama is that although he may be a fearsome demon, he is also an amazing chef. After we ate I decided to go to bed. I usually don't like to go to bed because I suffer from sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is worse for me because I am blind, and so I can hear all the scary noises but cannot see what is making them. Due to this I have developed insomnia. I usually only go to sleep if I have had an emotionally draining day like today. These don't happen very often, so I only sleep on rare occasions. The blood clone I had left behind had been able to sleep, but we had developed differently even though the blood clone was a part of me. I slowly drifted off to sleep. Time skipped to the academy. I arrived outside of the academy refreshed and ready to begin life as a genin of Konohagakure. I went in and took my normal place classroom. There were only a few people in the classroom. People who I didn't really mind, and didn't really mind me. We were scattered around the classroom, all minding our own business and waiting for Iruka-sensei. Shortly after I sat down the bell rang and people flooded into the classroom and took their seats, chatting amongst themselves. To my surprise Sasuke Uchiha came and sat down next to me. His fangirls were stood not too far away and were arguing about who was going to be on his team. The loudest of the fangirls was Sakura Haruno, who was arguing with Ino Yamanaka about who got into the classroom first. It was amusing to begin with, but it hurt my hypersensitive ears. I winced in pain. Sasuke noticed this and turned to Sakura and told her to not be so loud this early in the morning. Sakura batted her eyelashes and said, "Anything for you, Sasuke-kun." "Thanks," I mumbled to Sasuke. Sasuke did the famous Uchiha, HN, and we sat in a comfortable silence waiting to be put into teams. I kind of hope that Sasuke is on my team. Sasuke's point of view. I sat with Naruto today because he always looked so lonely. He always sat on his own and didn't have any friends. I felt sorry for Naruto. I have witnessed him being beaten up several times but never stepped in or did anything to help him. This is one of my many regrets. I feel like I could have been there for him because I know that he doesn't have a family like I do. I really hope that we are on the same team so that I can make it up to him. Naruto's POV. Iruka began to call out teams. Squad 7. Sakura Haruno, Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha. I was really happy to hear I had been put on a team with Sasuke. I look forward to working with him. I turned to him and smiled, and I could tell he was happy because his chakra had changed as it does when emotions change. He smiled back at me. Sakura was boasting to Ino about how she was on a team with Sasuke. Iruka called out the other teams and then dismissed us so that we could eat lunch with our teammates. After lunch we waited in the classroom for our Junin teacher. All the other squads had left with their senseis, and so I knew that we had Kakashi as our teacher. I scanned, with my chakra, the surrounding area knowing Kakashi would be close by. I found him looking at us through a hole in the wall at the end of the classroom. I turned to it and smiled. I then threw a kunai right next to it. I know he saw me smile at him because his chakras spiked in a fearful way. Sasuke and Sakura jumped when I threw the kunai. Then Sakura went to hit me on the head, calling me Usuratankachi. Sasuke caught her fist before it collided my head. I smiled gratefully at him and he nodded at me. Kakashi's POV. As I was spying on my squad I noticed that my Ototo was in there. I gulped knowing that this will be difficult. Just as I was thinking this, Naruto turned to me and smiled sadistically. He then threw a kunai right next to the hole I was peering through. I decided that now was the time to meet my students because the kunai thrown was only a warning. Naruto POV. I stood above the doorway waiting for Kakashi to enter. He opened the door, stepped in and looked around. I then jumped onto his back and pressed a kunai to his throat. Sakura gasped and Sasuke was curious as to what I was doing. Kakashi, I purred, please do not make me wait. You know how I hate waiting. Kakashi visibly gulped and I felt it against my arm. Understood, Naruto. I coughed. Sigh. Understood, Naruto-sama. Sasuke and Sakura were gobsmacked and their mouths were hanging open. You're going to catch flies like that? I said jokingly. They immediately shut their mouths, eyes still wide. I giggled even more. Anyway, meet me on the roof in 5 minutes, and then Kakashi shushined, away. I followed shortly after. When I was on the roof I smiled at Kakashi. Next time warn me when you are going to be late, I said smugly, knowing I'd shown him up. Okay Naruto. I will do next time, he said boredly. After a few minutes of comfortable silence, Sasuke and Sakura appeared at the top of the stairs, panting heavily. I giggled at the state they were in, imagining them in my head. Alright then everyone, take a seat and we'll get to know each other. Sakura, being the bright girl she is, asked Kakashi to demonstrate for us. Hi, my name is Kakashi. I have many likes and dislikes. My hobbies. None of your business and my dream is none of your concern. I giggled, expecting this kind of response. Okay Naruto, your turn. Hi, my name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I am blind. Sakura and Sasuke were shocked at this but didn't interrupt. I like ramen. Especially, Ichiraku ramen, and my brothers. Kakashi beamed at this, and I also like Kurama. My dislikes are bullies and manipulative people. My dream is to surpass my father as a Hokage and to create bonds between other nations to prevent another ninja war. Sasuke turned to me. Brothers? I thought you were an orphan who lived on your own. They're not my real brothers but they treat me like one. They are Kakashi and Ida-ni. I replied. Sasuke's POV. Ida-ni? Who's that? It sounds like Itachi but there is no way that Naruto knows Itachi. Who's Ida-ni? I asked. Ida-ni is Itachi Uchiha, who I believe is your brother. I was astounded that Itachi knew Naruto, let alone have a brotherly bond with him. Anyway, Kakashi said to break up the silence. Your turn Sasuke. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I like tomatoes, Itachi Oni-chan and my friends. I dislike people who hurt or bully my friends. My dream is to become an important member of the village. Okay then, on to you Pinky. Kakashi said, gesturing at Sakura. Hi, my name is Sakura Haruno. My likes are, looks at me. My dream is, looks at me and squeals. And my dislikes are Ino Pig and Naruto. Glares at Naruto. Both me and Kakashi frowned at this. Okay then, meet me at the training ground tomorrow and we'll do a drill. Naruto giggled. Meet me at sunrise and don't eat breakfast unless you want to throw up, he said mischievously. Naruto giggled again. He looks really cute when he does. Sakura's pav. I ran out of the house before I could finish doing my hair, which was a shame because now I won't look good for Sasuke. I didn't eat breakfast because Kakashi-sensei told us not to, and also I wanted to be thinner for Sasuke. He's so dreamy. I arrived at the training ground at sunrise. Sasuke was already there. I tried to talk to him but my efforts were pointless. Naruto and Kakashi-sensei were late. Naruto pav. I woke up an hour after sunrise knowing that Kakani would wake up later than that. I ate some breakfast and sealed some in a scroll for the rest of my teammates. I arrived at the training ground and Sakura yelled at me for being late. I then shoved some food into her hand and went over to Sasuke and did the same thing. They ate it greedily and thanked me afterwards. Kakashi-sensei arrived an hour after that. I held him in a headlock until he apologized. Sasuke and Sakura were not yet accustomed to my relationship with Kakani. Kakashi pav. After Naruto released me from the headlock, I proceeded to give the instructions for the bell test. Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura. Today we will do the bell test. I held up 2 bells in front of them. Your job is to get 1 bell each. But Kakashi-sensei, there are only 2 bells and there are 3 of us. Sakura cut him off. And I thought she was supposed to be smart. Yes, Sakura. This means that the person who doesn't get a bell will be sent back to the academy. Sakura started protesting at this, claiming it to be unfair. Sasuke showed some form of emotion by grunting and Naruto just giggled. He does that a lot. Naruto pav. Ready, go. Me, Sasuke and Sakura jumped back and hid. I hid my chakra perfectly. Sasuke hid his, but because of my heightened sensory ninjutsu I could tell his whereabouts easily. Sakura made no attempt to hide her chakra. I made my way to Sasuke's position. He couldn't tell I was there until I covered his mouth. Shush, I whispered, releasing my grip. I heard shuffling as Sasuke turned to face me. His chakra levels returned to normal as his panic subsided. Naruto? Sasuke whispered. What are you doing here? We need to work together so that we can get the bells. That's the point of this test, I said eagerly. Sasuke's chakra changed to show that he had clocked onto what I was saying. I could imagine the gears working in his head as he figured it out. Okay Naruto, but we need a plan, Sasuke replied. Okay, but first help me get Sakura to cooperate with us. She'll only agree to help if you're with me on this. Sasuke pav. I nodded my head but then verbally agreed, remembering Naruto couldn't see. He smiled back. He looks really cute when he smiles. I find myself thinking of Naruto more often recently. I feel like I may be developing feelings for him. I wonder what he is. Naruto pav. We made our way over to Sakura's location to find her in a genjutsu. Geez, what did you do, Kakani? I released the genjutsu and Sakura jumped up. Where's Sasuke? She said, panicked, looking around frantically, and then jumping on Sasuke when she realized he was alright. While she was glomping him, I began to come up with a plan. Kakashi's pav. I wonder how Naruto has handled the problem of teamwork. Just as I was thinking this, Naruto emerged from the ground behind me and pressed a kunai to my neck, grinning from ear to ear. Unsure on Naruto's next move, I used a substitution jutsu to get out of my current predicament. I appeared behind a tree to find another Naruto. This Naruto had chakra-infused shuriken and I narrowly dodged them. Then Naruto punched me through the tree and we ended up in the clearing again. Sasuke pav. I watched in awe as Naruto battled Kakashi-sensei. He matched Kakashi's strength but surpassed him in speed due to his smaller and more aerodynamic physique. Then Naruto did the signal and Sakura cast a genjutsu. I ran in and took the bells off of his belt. He didn't notice as he was still battling Naruto. Or what he thought was Naruto. What he was fighting was actually a blood clone. The real Naruto was with Sakura in the trees. He was concealing her chakra while she held the genjutsu in place because she couldn't do it herself. I ran back to the cover of the trees where the rest of the team were. Shortly after, the alarm Kakashi-sensei had set rang, signaling the end of the test. We emerged from the tree cover and Naruto dispelled the blood clone. Kakashi-sensei looked disappointed at us. Naruto just smirked. You failed to retrieve the bells. Kakashi-sensei said, disapprovingly. Actually, Naruto said, signaling to me to hand him the bells. We did get the bells. He said smugly. Sakura released the genjutsu and the bells on Kakashi-sensei's belt disappeared. Naruto then handed a belt to me and Sakura. Alright then, is this your final decision, Naruto? Naruto nodded in response. Well then, you pass. Congratulations. Everyone cheered, even me. Time skipped to the nighttime. I lay in bed thinking about Naruto. I now realize that I am deeply infatuated with him. I find myself thinking about him all the time. I don't know if I love him, but I have a minor obsession with him. Everything he does intrigues me. Everything he says sounds interesting to me. I wonder what Naruto is thinking about now. Naruto Pav. I had decided to take a walk through the village when I heard the third Hokage's grandson cry out. I hurried over to make sure Konohamaru was alright. I sensed other chakra signatures with him. One of them I recognized. It's the One-Tails kid. Shikaku. I hurried faster now in case Konohamaru was in danger. Konohamaru was being held by his ankle above the ground. I walked up to his tormentor and batted my eyelashes at him. Everyone says I look like a girl. May as well use it to my advantage. His tormentor turned to me, chakra going from hostile to lustful. Well, hello gorgeous. What can I do for you? I giggled. Excuse me mister, I said, trying to mimic how Sakura talks to Sasuke. Could you please put down the honorable grandson of the third Hokage? I'm not sure you tormenting him is the best idea. I giggled again. Okay sweet cheeks, but only if I can play with you instead, he said flirtatiously. I giggled once more. How about, no, and with that I fly-kicked him in the gut, sending him sprawling against the fence. I caught Konohamaru before he could fall on his head. Kankuro. I heard a worried shout from a woman approaching. Why you? The growl died out in her throat as she felt the killer intent oozing out of every fiber of my being. I'm ever so sorry, but your friend was tormenting the honorable grandson of the third Hokage. That could be considered an act of war, I said while smiling. She gulped. Then the chakra signature I recognized appeared behind me. I teleported behind it. He was stood behind the tree. I placed my hand on his forehead and sent him a tiny bit of the Kyuubi's chakra. The Biju inside of him went into a comatose state that can only be broken by the Jinchuriki in front if me. His chakra changed from complete rage to tranquil. He then looked at me curiously before passing out. I picked him up under one arm and beckons for his teammates to follow. They followed in shock and awe as I lead them back to my apartment. Once I got home I placed the Biju vessel down onto the bed in the spare room and then went into the main room to talk to his team. I sat down on the sofa and they followed. Who are you? The girl asked. She was the one who broke out of the trance-like state they were in. I am Naruto. I am the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Who are you? My name is Tamari and this is Kankuro, she said gesturing at her comrade. That was Gaara. He is. I know. I cut her off. He is the One-Tails Jinchuriki. I have placed a tiny fragment of the Kyuubi's chakra into his mindscape which has put the Biju into a comatose state. This means that Gaara will be able to sleep peacefully without fear of the One-Tails rampaging. Tamari and Kankuro were flabbergasted. And by the way, I said turning to Kankuro, I am actually a boy and I don't appreciate the way you treated me on the basis that you thought I was a girl. If he was shocked before, he was definitely confused now. You're lying, he said back, refusing to believe the truth. Why don't you find out for yourself? I said while smiling seductively. He gulped. Serves him right, the perv. Kurama chose this point to make himself present as he emerged from my bedroom, rubbing his eyes. Tamari and Kankuro looked up at him in confusion as he transformed into a fox and he sat on my lap and nuzzled my chest, asking to be petted. I complied and, with a sigh, explained to the Sand siblings what was going on. Gaara's Pav. I awoke in an unfamiliar room. I could hear laughter coming from a room down the hall. The room I was in was small, but tidy. There was a chest of drawers in the far end of the room, under a window which looked out over the village. From what I could see, I think the place I was in the center of the village. The sky was dark, the stars were out and the lights from homes illuminated the village. Recollection of the blonde-haired boy with eyes bluer than the ocean hid me like a brick. I then realized I felt calm and rested. The urge to kill everything that moved had gone and my bloodlust had been quenched. Now was probably the time to go and demand answers from the people down the hall. Naruto's Pav. I sensed the moving presence from Gaara. Ah, so he's awake now. This should be interesting. He sat down next to me with his arms crossed. His siblings automatically looked down and became anxious of his next move. He nodded at his siblings and then turned to me. I suppose you want an explanation then? He grunted in response. I sighed. Okay, but don't interrupt me. He nodded. I am the vessel for the Kyuubi no Kitsune, which makes me a Jinchuriki like you. I placed a bit of the Cubus chakra inside of you, which has placed Shukaku into a comatose state. It has also quenched your bloodlust and need to kill. Also, it means that you will be able to sleep without being a danger to everyone. However, you will need to stay here with me so that I can keep an eye on you while you are here for the Chunin exams. He nodded as everything sunk in. What happened to your eyes? He asked. His voice was very husky and monotone. I was shocked he could see the very tiny line across my eyes. Kurama, still in my lap, stiffened. He still felt bad that he couldn't completely save my eyes. I stroked his fur and rubbed his ears to reassure him. He purred. Years ago, on my birthday, the villagers went out on a fox hunt, which is when they come and beat me up for being the Kyuubi vessel. Though, that time they went too far and blinded me by plunging kunai into my eyes. They claimed that they were taking an eye for an eye. Quite funny when I think back on it. Tamari and Kankuro were horrified, but Gaara just looked down. The people in my village are too afraid of me to try anything like that. In fact, my father attempted to kill me 6 times, each time failing, of course. It's getting late now, Tamari said, beckoning to her brother. We're going to head to our accommodations. See you tomorrow, Gaara. And on that note, they left. Me and Gaara then began planning sleeping arrangements. So that I could keep an eye on him, we ended up in the same bed. Third-person Pav. A lone figure sat on a branch outside of Naruto's bedroom window, looking down on the sleeping blonde and the redhead with jealousy. He then began to head home. Little did he know that Naruto had sensed him and knew he was there the whole time. Naruto smirked at the retreating chakra signature. Sasuke Pav. I arrived home very late that night. I had gone to observe the Dobi in his house. But when I got there, he was sharing a bed with a redhead. I didn't know what this means. I need to have a conversation with my Dobi. Naruto Pav. I awoke at dawn like I always do. It's a shame that I cannot see because I always seem to wake at dawn, but I will never see the sunrise. I went and had a wash, then I began making breakfast. Because I had a guest, I decided to do a fry-up. Gaara Pav. The smell of bacon and eggs wafted its way into my nostrils. My stomach rumbled as I made my way towards the delicious scent. I followed my nose into the kitchen where Naruto was making breakfast. He served it onto 3 plates. Naruto, there are only 2 of us. Who is the 3rd plate for? As I said this, a man with fox ears and a tail walked in. Naruto handed him a plate and then stroked his ears. The man, even though he was a lot taller and older looking than us, he looked like he was in his early 20s. Purred and bent down a bit so Naruto could stroke his ears more. I stared in shock as this fully grown man, with animal attributes, allowed this small boy to pet him. And he was purring too. I retained a calm composure as I watched, with curiosity, as the pair acted around each other. Gaara, Naruto said, breaking the silence. His voice shocked me out of my daydreaming. This is Kurama. I was shocked. Kurama was the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the beast with 9 tails. And he was standing right in front of me, purring while he was having his ears rubbed. This demon, as people called him, who struck terror into people's hearts. Who has killed thousands, destroyed entire villages, in fact he had even destroyed the village I was in now, was being petted by a blind 12-year-old. It's fair to say that anyone who was in my position would feel the same way. I sat at the table, which was a kitchen island by the way, across from Kurama and Naruto. It was only when I began eating that I realized how hungry I actually was. I dug into my food as if it were my last meal. Naruto giggled from across the table as I inhaled my food. What can I say, I was hungry. I slowed down my pace as I realized I would probably get indigestion. I finished my food with a satisfied sigh and patted my stomach. I haven't eaten like that in years. I looked across at Naruto, who had barely touched his food. Kurama was in fox form and was lying, belly up, on Naruto's lap and Naruto was tickling his stomach. Kurama was twitching his leg in satisfaction. Then Naruto cleared the table and began washing up. I continued to sit awkwardly until there was a knock at the door. "Gaara, could you go open the door please?" Naruto said while drying off the plates. I obediently went to the front door. Stood outside were my siblings. I opened the door and they were surprised to see that I was the one to let them in. They were obviously expecting Naruto to come. Temari and Kankuro smiled respectfully at me and then shuffled in. They always seemed frightened around me, even though I am their youngest sibling and teammate. Although I can understand their fear. Everyone is afraid of me. Apart from Naruto. He seems to fear nothing. Naruto, who had now finished the dishes, came over to greet my siblings and we sat down around the island in Naruto's kitchen. Kakashi Pav. I decided that I would enter Squad 7 into the Chunin exams. I believe that they have the potential to become Chunin. Especially since they have Naruto Shivers. He scares the crap out of me sometimes. Almost as much as Tenzo. Shivers again. Time skip. Midday at the training ground. "I have gathered you here today to make a big announcement," I said to my team. "Oh no, Kaka ni, don't tell us you're getting married. Or having kids. I can't be an uncle just yet," Naruto said sarcastically. I rolled my eyes. "No Naruto. I have decided to enter you into the Chunin exams." Naruto cut me off holding the envelopes out to Sasuke and Sakura, who eagerly took one. Even Sasuke showed some form of excitement. I sighed. "Thanks for that Naruto." Naruto held a kunai to me throat as he jumped on my back. All jokiness has left his expression, his face only showing seriousness. I gulped. My Ototo can be very scary at times. Sakura and Sasuke gulped too. Gulp, thank you very much Naruto-sama. I said, genuinely fearing for my life because, you see, Naruto's expressions are difficult to read for he has no traits that give him away. Like some people laugh or their faces twitch when they lie or are being sarcastic. I am very good at reading these traits, what with me being an ex-Anbu member. However, Naruto has none of these traits and so his mood swings are difficult to see whether he is being serious or not. Naruto giggled and climbed up my back. Me, Sasuke and Sakura released a breath we hadn't realized we had been holding. Naruto walked away to his apartment waving the letter above his head and smiling brightly, as if he hadn't just held a kunai to my neck. I then explained to Sasuke and Sakura the rules of handing in the forms. I was in my room humming to myself as I brushed my long pink hair for bed. I had to remain pretty for Sasuke. I was mentally preparing myself for tomorrow when Team 7 and Sasuke would go and sign up for the Chunin exams. I was really psyched for it because it will be when I can show Sasuke how useful I am and how much better I am than that useless Naruto. He can't even see, so I am definitely better than him. Also I will be able to surpass Ino Pig in skill and strength and Sasuke will definitely choose me over her. Sasuke's Pav. I awoke in a bed that was not my own and then memories of the previous night came crashing down. I smirked to myself knowing that Naruto now belonged to me and nobody else could take him away from me. But, where was he? I decided that I would go and find my lover and so put on some bottoms and left the room. Naruto's Pav. I sensed a movement of chakra from my bedroom and realized Sasuke had woken up. His chakra point was displaying smugness and I chuckled. I was relaxing on the sofa and Kyuubi was resting his head on my lap. He was in human form but still purred as I ran my hands through his hair and played with his ears. Sasuke emerged from the room and turned the corner to see me petting Kurama. His chakra changed from smugness to jealousy and possession. I looked up to him and smiled. I could imagine his face was contorted into fury. I giggled and he came and sat down on my other side. I sensed another chakra movement and then soon after Sasuke's arrival Gaara came and sat across from us on the other sofa. If Sasuke was annoyed before then he was definitely pissed now. I leant my head on his shoulder to reassure him and he seemed to calm down. Gaara, I began, this is Sasuke Uchiha. I then turned to Sasuke. Sasuke, this is Gaara of the Sand. He is the son of the Case Cage and will be competing among us in the Chunin exams with his siblings. They both turned to each other and nodded out of respect. My smile broadened. This relationship with the possessive Sasuke Uchiha was going to be very entertaining. Gaara Pav. I sat across from Naruto and his lover, teammate. I looked the Uchiha up and down and his composure oozed jealousy. Every pore in his body seemed to emit his possessiveness over Naruto. Kurama was curled up in human form in Naruto's lap and I could only assume the fact Naruto was petting him probably set Uchiha off. "Gaara, did your team tell you what time they were coming?" Naruto asked me. I glanced at the clock. "In 23 minutes, I politely replied. Naruto rose from his seat, knocking Kurama's head off of his lap and onto the sofa as he walked into the kitchen. He gestured for Sasuke to follow. Sasuke also rose and obediently followed after. Naruto began cooking some French toast, waffles and pancakes. He made conversation with me, asking me questions about myself and my team. He also humored Sasuke by talking to him and giving him occasional kisses. Kurama sat in a pounce-like position facing Sasuke. I knew if Sasuke messed up, Kurama would be quick to slice Sasuke open. Which is good. I was growing quite attached to Naruto. He was good company. I feel we can be good friends in the future. There was a knock at the door and Sasuke went to open it. My teammates looked curiously at Sasuke but shuffled in anyway. They seemed to always get someone unexpected at the door. Naruto waved them over and introduced Sasuke. They nodded politely, introduced themselves, and then we all sat down to eat. Sasuke Pav. We sat with Gaara's team and ate the breakfast Naruto had made. It was one of the best things I had eaten and could definitely rival my mother's cooking. Which is a rare thing for me to say. Naruto will make a great life partner in the future. Naruto made polite small talk with everyone and I kept quiet, giving my input when necessary with a grunt or a "hn." Kyuubi sat, curled up in fox form, on Naruto's lap as Naruto tickled his stomach. He ate little of his food and mainly fed it to Kurama. Finally, when breakfast was done, everyone helped Naruto move and scrape plates, and then Gaara's team went and sat down as I helped Naruto with the washing up. He washed and I dried. We made a great team, him and I. After we finished that, there was another knock at the door. Naruto went to open it. As he rose, he shot me a wicked grin and then he winked at me. Something was gonna go down. There was another impatient knock which Naruto walked over to slowly. After a third and final knock, Naruto opened the door. "Pav, hello? Can I help you?" he asked. I looked at him annoyed. "As a matter of fact, you can. I've been stood out here for ages waiting for you to answer the door," I said matter-of-factly. "Have you seen him?" I asked, still frustrated. He looked at me and nodded slowly, grinning all the while. The door opened in a way that meant I couldn't see inside. "Well," I said impatiently. "Where is he?" I asked. He tapped the side of his nose and winked. "Kakashi Pav. I hope that they would all come to a joint decision about the exams. I know Sasuke will be fine, but I'm worried about Sakura and Naruto. Sakura, I think, will feel she is a burden and not want to do the exams as not to let her team down. What am I kidding? She won't want to let Sasuke down. She doesn't care about Naruto. Which saddens me. I'm worried about Naruto as well. It's not that I think he isn't ready, because he could be a member of the Anbu Black Ops now if he wanted to. But what I am worried about is if he snaps. That would be devastating. I know Kurama will try to contain him as much as he can, but that doesn't eliminate all the hatred and abuse he has suffered all these years. It's really changed him and I worry for his sanity. And only Naruto, Kurama and all the people Naruto met on his journey know Naruto left the village when he was younger. However, all that the blood clone that Naruto had left in his place had experienced got passed on to Naruto. Since me, nor Itachi can be there for him during the exam, we had best just hope that Kurama can handle any bloodlust that Naruto can no longer control. Sasuke Pav. Somebody had knocked at the door and Naruto had gone to answer it. He was there for a long time as he spoke to them. He looked back and winked at me and I walked over to him and slung my arm around his shoulder and began nuzzling his neck. The shocked face of Sakura Haruno looked back at us. Naruto grinned and I smirked. She stood there, mouth hanging open, unable to form sentences, just making weird strangled noises. After she came to her senses, she burst into tears and ran off. Now she would leave me alone. Naruto shut the door and turned around and gave me a kiss. I kissed him back. Gaara's Pav. Before Naruto closed the door, we heard someone crying and running off. After that, Naruto and Sasuke came and sat across from us. Naruto leaning on Sasuke's chest whilst sitting in his lap, and Sasuke resting his chin on Naruto's head. We continued to discuss the Chunin exams and getting to know each other better. After about 15 minutes of exchanging pleasantries, there was another knock at the door. Kakashi Pav. I knocked on Naruto's door and Sasuke answered it. I was a little confused as to why Sasuke answered it but didn't question it. He beckoned me into the room of people where Naruto waved and yelled, "Ahaya Kaka ni." I replied and sat next to Naruto, who was sat in Sasuke's lap. This explains why Sasuke opened the door. Across from us sat some Suna shinobi who looked to be a few years older than Team 7, apart from the redhead who looked to be the same age. Naruto introduced me to his guests and I respectively nodded. They nodded back. Time skipped to when Squad 7 hand in their forms. We went to the room in the academy where we were supposed to hand in our forms. There was a badly placed genjutsu on the room on the floor below the designated room for the forms. Several genin were trying to get into it. I smirked as I followed Naruto up the stairs, Sakura trailing behind us. We walked into the room on the 4th floor and were greeted by the snarling faces of other competitors. The killer intent they were aiming at us was overpowered by the glare of Naruto. We walked over to the rest of the Rookie 9 and we began quietly talking amongst ourselves. We saw Gaara's team across the room and acknowledged each other. Then the exam proctor walked into the room and told us to place our forms into the box in front of him. We would be given some time to talk and plan with our teammates before the first exam. The Rookie 9 all ended up in this large hall where a boy with a black bowl cut, wearing a green lycra jumpsuit, and the bushiest eyebrows in existence, approached Sakura. He kept trying to proclaim his love for her but she was having none of it. He then tried to engage in a fight with me for Sakura's love but I just ignored him and cuddled Naruto. The lycra-clad boy, apparently called Rock Lee, was dragged off by his teammates Ten and Neji. They began apologizing for their teammates' behavior, and dragged the protesting Lee away. The room became quiet once more and then the proctor Ibiki walked in and told us the exam would be starting soon and that we should make our way over to the exam hall. As we walked in we were given a number. This is where we are to sit during the exam. I sat down and the rules were explained to us. Naruto Pav. I faced down to my paper. Kakashi had requested they prepare a braille exam so that I would be able to complete it. I was very glad he did as it would have been a struggle to complete the exam. Although I would have managed. I knew most of the answers but due to my heightened hearing I could hear as each pen made a mark and I knew what it was writing. I focused in on Sakura as she was on the same question I had missed. She answered it easily. I waited a moment before copying it, in case the exam overseers noticed. After the time ran out the proctor announced that the final question would be given now. If you fail to answer this question you, and your team, will never be able to take the exams again. If you leave now you will be able to take it next time. I sat and listened as a great number of the genin in the room decided not to risk it. Sakura's chakra was giving off anxious waves. I turned in her direction and when I knew she was looking at me I shook my head. Her chakra then became a little less anxious and more calm. I knew she would be overthinking this. Sasuke seemed fine so I didn't feel the need to reassure him. Sasuke Pav. The exam proctor then surveyed the remaining shinobi. Congratulations. You all passed the first stage of the Chunin exams. Everyone became confused. And just to add to our confusion a purple blur jumped through the window. I'm Enko Mitarashi, and I'll be your second exam proctor. Her voice boomed. You're early, Ibiki sighed. Welp. Anyway meet me by the Forest of Death for the second exam. And with that she jumped back through the window from where she came. Ibiki sighed again and we all filed out of the room towards the Forest of Death. Once we'd arrived at the Forest of Death Enko Mitarashi greeted us with a sadistic grin on her face. Okay everyone, you will all be given a scroll. If you get a heaven scroll you will need to find an earth scroll from another team and enter the tower. Vice versa with the earth scroll. While she was speaking each team was being given a scroll and a number. We got an earth scroll so I created a shadow clone that hanged into a leaf jonin and made its way towards the cart the scrolls were being kept on. The clone stealthily retrieved a heaven scroll and made its way towards our numbered gate. After being told the rules and deadline each team made their way to their designated gates. When the bell went off the gates were opened and Squad 7 began their descent throughout the, appropriately named, Forest of Death. We traveled for an hour before I told my team what I had done. They looked dumbfounded but went along with it, and so we headed as fast as we could to the center of the forest where we would be staying until everyone else finished the exams. It took us about half a day to arrive there, luckily without any encounters from any other teams. Once we arrived in the tower, we went into a room where there was a riddle on the wall. We soon figured it out and followed its instructions by placing the scrolls down. Once we'd done this, Iruka Ni appeared. He looked at us in turn, then muttered something to himself. "Congrats Squad 7, you have passed the second exam. You may go and pick a room while we wait for the time to run out." As Squad 7 were leaving the room, Iruka Ni called me to stay behind. We waited for them to leave the room, and then Iruka turned me to face him. "How are you, Naruto? Are you okay? Have you been eating properly? Are you sleeping enough? What is going on with you and Sasuke?" Iruka's motherly instincts kicked in as he began bombarding me with questions, as we hadn't seen each other in a while due to missions and tight schedules. Although it's annoying, I do appreciate Iruka Ni's motherly concern, as I have never had a parental figure in my life. Although I don't see Iruka as a father figure, he is like a really overprotective brother. "Yes, Iruka, I have been eating well and have been sleeping like I normally do. And Sasuke is my boyfriend." With that, I gave Iruka a hug and walked to find Sasuke's room. It wasn't hard to find, as his chakra point was very prominent. He chose a room on the top floor. From what I could sense, it had a pretty large floor plan and an ensuite. Sasuke was at the edge of the room, and I could only assume he was gazing out of the window. Once I got to the room, I knocked on the door and Sasuke opened it for me. There was a window seat that I sat on, which was ironic as I couldn't see the view. Sasuke sat across from me. "Sasuke, could you describe the view for me?" I asked. After some shifting around from Sasuke's direction, he agreed and began his description, never missing a detail. I sat myself in Sasuke's lap as he continued to see for me. His description was so detailed that I could clearly picture his scene in my head. There is a great expanse of green. The trees stretch out further than the horizon, each one at least 50 feet tall and booming with life. The canopy is vibrant in every shade of green that exists. The sky is gray and the clouds are thick and heavy, almost like sheep's wool. They contrast the vividness of the trace. They clump together and completely block out the sun, making everything look gloomy. The birds are constantly darting about over the tops of the trees and fighting with one another. From up here they look like little insects zipping about. Sasuke continued to tell me every little detail until I had a full picture. Once he'd finished, I got off of his lap and faced him. "Can I touch your face?" I asked, and Sasuke lifted my hand to his cheek. I then began feeling every last inch of his face. His nose, his eyelids, his lips, and even his hair. He sat through all of it until I decided there wasn't much more for me to feel. It started to get late and Sasuke became tired, and so we cuddled until he fell asleep. I remained awake like I do every night, however tonight was different as I finally felt peaceful enough to rest my body and lower my guard. I awoke with my arms around Naruto's waist. I shifted slightly to get up without waking him, but he spun around and grabbed onto me, pulling me back into the bed. He was burying his face into my chest. I wrapped my arms around his small, feminine figure. "How long have you been awake?" I asked quietly. "I didn't sleep," Naruto sheepishly admitted, refusing to look me in the eyes. I sighed. I'd forgotten about Naruto's insomnia. I stroked his hair and kissed him on the top of his head. The sun was shining through the large window we had. We still had 3 days until the second Chunin exam ends. I could sense someone's presence outside of our door and looked down at Naruto. "It's Gaara," he replied, and got up to answer the door. They spoke quietly for a little bit and then Naruto got back under the covers. "What did he say?" I asked. "He was just making sure we were okay and also telling me his plans on what he's going to do these few days we wait. Oh, and he was updating me on how Shukaku was behaving. Apparently he's woken up a few times but hasn't said or done anything." I grunted in reply and then pecked Naruto on the lips. Afterwards we went and had a shower. I enjoy showering with Naruto. We don't do anything like that, you pervs. And every time I end up washing Naruto's back, I can see all of his scars. It hurts me every time because I know I could have prevented a few of them. After our shower we made our way to the dining room and had breakfast. Once we'd finished the food that was nowhere close to being as good as the heaven Naruto serves on a plate. Afterwards we rendezvoused with Gaara and his team and began to do things to pass the time quicker. A few days had passed and it was now the final day of the second exam. Only a few teams had arrived back from the Forest of Death, many being from Konohagakure. Team Guy, Team Kurenai and Team Asuma had all arrived back. They were tired and beat up, but they still made it back. The Konoha 12 were all back together. Not many teams returned from the Forest of Death. Apparently there had actually been a few casualties and some ninjas had died. Luckily it was no one we knew, but they were mourned anyway. Due to lack of teams there was no need for the preliminaries they had planned and we were all free to go. Naruto's POV. Once we were dismissed I turned to Sasuke. Sasuke. I began, blushing as I spoke. Would you like to move in with me? I blurted out. Sasuke was silent for a while. Then he gently lifted my chin to his face and kissed me passionately. Oh Naruto, I would love to. I beamed in return and then raised a key that I had prepared for him. His chakra signature was happy and so we walked, hand in hand, to the place we now would call home. Sakura POV. I watched from the shadows as Naruto and Sasuke walked back to their now shared apartment. I had decided now was the time to act as my window began to close. Soon. I'll do it soon. I decided now that enough was enough and that I had to make my move soon otherwise I'd miss my chance. I had been contemplating every action, analyzed every consequence and how that affected my end goal. I planned to do it straight after the final exam as everyone would be busy celebrating and rewarding themselves for their valiant efforts. This would be an ideal time. Nothing could deter me. I had to do this. Naruto POV. I led there, wrapped in Sasuke's arms, as I had done the whole night. Although my insomnia still was a problem I no longer felt scared to sleep. And I still have sleep paralysis. But now I have Sasuke here with me. And that makes a world of difference. The comfort of laying in his presence can calm me, no matter how bad the situation. The Chunin exams were in a few weeks however Sasuke and I never found the need to train. Today Sasuke was going to introduce me to his family. Even Ida Ni would be there. I was so excited. Sasuke began stirring so I pecked him on the lips. He opened his sleep-hazed eyes and smiled down at me. His chakra nature was tranquil and happy, which made me even happier. I beamed in response. He kissed me on my forehead and then we got up to make breakfast. It was just us in the house now because Gaara had gone back to Sunahagakure for the time up until the final exam. It was very peaceful, just the two of us. I made my way into the kitchen area and Sasuke followed, sitting atop a counter, as I began making breakfast and coffee. I decided today that I would make myself a smoothie and Sasuke a cook-up as I still couldn't eat a whole portion to myself. Just as I started cooking Kurama walked through the door and so I threw in a few more pieces of bacon for him. After breakfast Sasuke and I curled up on the couch and watched some trashy TV. After an hour we decided to get ready to have lunch at the Uchiha compound with Sasuke's family. I decided to wear a black shirt and some orange booty shorts, degree, with my weapons pouch fastened just below where they cut off. The shirt was tight and clung to my petite yet muscular frame. I tied my long, sunflower hair behind me in a tight bun and laced up my knee-high boots. I also wore one Sasuke's hoodies which completely engulfs my body. It has the Uchiha crest on the back. Kurama told me I looked nice in my mindscape and so I took his word for it. We made our way over to Sasuke's childhood home, which was on the other side of the village. Sasuke held my hand as we walked. To the shock of the villagers present however they didn't say anything. We finally arrived at the gates of the Uchiha district. There wasn't much going on, everyone was just getting on with their daily routine. Nobody batted an eyelid at our interlocked hands. Sasuke guided me up the steps and into his family's home. Ida Ni was at the door and I rushed into his arms. Sasuke seemed somewhat confused and very jealous. Itachi poked me in the head and then embraced Sasuke, treating him in a similar manner. This way, Itachi said, beckoning us into the family room. We followed behind. Sasuke's mother and father sat across from us. Makoto seemed pleasantly surprised by me whereas Fugaku seemed unsure. I shook each of them by the hand whilst Sasuke introduced me. Then we took our seats across from them. I neatly folded my hands in my lap and crossed my ankles. So Mum, Dad, this is my boyfriend Naruto Uzumaki. I beamed in their direction. Pleasure to meet you, I said cheerfully. Pleasure to meet you too Naruto, Makoto said, equaling my cheerfulness. Fugaku just grunted back at me. Naruto, I used to be great friends with your mother, Kushina Uzumaki. Makoto said. Really? I replied. Oh yes. We used to hang around all the time when we were younger, causing havoc and whatnot. I chuckled in response. That sounds a lot like my mother, I said whilst scratching the back of my head. Anyway Naruto, the meal is ready now. Sasuke told me you liked ramen and so that's what I've made. You do like ramen, right? I smiled politely and nodded my head. Sasuke pav. Alright then this way. My mother pointed in the direction of the dining room door. Naruto gave me a look for help and so I held Naruto's hand and guided him towards the room with the food. My mother gave me an odd look and I mouthed that I'd explain later. We all sat around the table, my brother included, and began eating the amazing meal that had been prepared. There was an almost uncomfortable silence as my father kept staring down Naruto, trying to intimidate him unbeknownst to him that Naruto is blind. After eating very little of his food, Naruto excused himself to go to the bathroom. I guided him up there as the house was rather large and had multiple stories. I knew Naruto would be able to find his way back and so I rejoined my family in the dining room. They looked to me for answers. What's happening? My father asked impatiently, obviously surprised his power of intimidation didn't work. Naruto is blind. Itachi chimed in from his place at the table. I'm pretty sure that they had forgotten his presence as they whirled around to face him. How do you know? My mother asked, shocked. Remember how they assigned me that child protege to train? Well, that was Naruto. So that's how they met. I had never really heard that much of the story. He's a child protege? My father inquired. How? They chose me to train him alongside Kakashi Hitaki to enhance his knowledge and senses so that he could perform at the levels of other students, and now he possesses the skills of an Anbu leader. I heard the toilet flush from upstairs and knew that Naruto could tell we were talking about him. In fact, maybe that's why he left, and I knew he could get around without any help. Oh, he has given me this chance to explain to my family the things they don't want to ask him. Shortly after, Naruto reclaimed his seat at the table and forced himself to eat more as not to appear disrespectful. I tapped him on the leg underneath the table to let him know he didn't have to finish it. He let out a relieved breath and continued to eat the miso broth. A few hours later we had finished eating and decided it was time to go. My mother hugged Naruto and told him to come back anytime he wanted. My father surprised me and shook Naruto's hand. We returned to the apartment and curled up together on the couch. A few weeks had passed and then suddenly it was the night before the third, and final, Chumonada exam. Gaara and the Sand siblings had come to stay with myself and Naruto again. The sky was dark and Naruto had just finished preparing a hearty meal for everyone, consisting of falafel, quinoa and other things like that. It was very healthy and was probably a good thing to be eating before the exams, but to be honest it wasn't as nice as the non-healthy things Naruto cooks. However, my thoughtful blonde kitsune had put tomatoes in the salad and had put extra on my plate. Gosh, I loved him. After dinner had been cleared away, the Sand siblings returned to their respective places of residence, whilst in Konohagakure and Gaara had taken his usual room within Naruto's apartment. Whilst training in Tsunohagakure, he had developed a mutual understanding and agreement with Shukaku, the One-Tails. He hadn't quite developed a strong bond with it, like Naruto had. But he could use its power somewhat without horrible side effects, such as destroying the village and going on a killing spree. I walked over to Naruto as he was washing the dishes and wrapped my arms around his waist whilst kissing and nuzzling his neck. He let out small quiet moans and frequent gasps. Not now, Sasu, he said to my disappointment, after we've graduated to Chunin. He said, it was a tactful move. Now I really needed to become Chunin. Later, we arrived at the arena and were sent to the waiting area. I was fighting Gaara and Naruto was fighting Neji. This should be a piece of cake, I thought to myself. There were a few fights in which Shikamaru won against Tamari and Shino won against Kankuro. Sakura and Ino came to a stalemate, and Kiba fought Lee won obviously. Hinata and Ten fought as well, leaving Hinata victorious. Naruto Pav. After a series of fights, my name was finally called and I made my way down to the battleground after giving Sasuke a small kiss for luck. I faced in Neji's general direction. He mumbled over to me, I know you're blind and I admire you for it. It didn't surprise me that he could tell, what with his Kekkei Genkai the Byakugan. The administrator announced the beginning of the fight and I immediately jumped back into the bushes. I began making earth clones and water clones, along with a blood clone to take my place on the surface. Then I used a jutsu to hide in the ground. I could sense Neji above me and always remained in his blind spot behind him. He was fighting the water clones and trying to locate my blood clone. As he finally found it, the earth clones I had made sprang out of the ground and pulled him under. Using the palm rotation, he was able to expel himself from the hole I dig him into. Still unaware that he wasn't fighting the real me, he continued to attempt to land a blow on my blood clone. However, the clone had all the same skills that I did and dodged every attack gracefully. My clone then performed a great fireball jutsu, which Neji just about missed, however it seared off his eyebrows. Then my clone ensnared Neji in a water prism and began solidifying it into ice. Unfortunately for me, Neji had been trained well and performed a substitution jutsu. And then threw a kunai straight into the blood clone's heart. I heard Sasuke yell my name as soon as that happened. He sounded panicked and scared, and it took all of my strength to remain hidden and not reveal myself and tell him I was alright. And you see, the thing about blood clones is that when they are fatally wounded, they explode, showering the attacker in blood, usually leaving them in a state of shock so that the real ninja can catch them off guard. It's why they are much better than shadow clones, as their deaths can be used as diversions. So when the blood clone exploded, everyone went quiet. The crowds, the other competitors, the onlooking ninjas in charge, and most importantly, Neji. He stood there in a state of shock, unsure on what to do. Before he could regain any kind of sense, I burst out of the ground and pinned Neji to the floor by pulling his arms behind his back and pressing a kunai to his throat. Everyone was still in a state of bafflement, but the crowds began booing and jeering, upset that a member of the Hyuga clan could be beaten so easily by the Kyuubi brat. The administrator came over to me and congratulated me for winning and then quickly escorted me away before the angry mob of a crowd could begin throwing rocks and bottles. Neji followed after, covered head to toe in the clone's blood. He was still in shock, but now he was in awe of my tactics and attacks. Once I arrived back at the balcony we were stood at before, Sasuke ran up to me and picked me up by the waist and spanned me around. I was hugging his neck and we just started making out, in front of everyone, and they just stood there in shock as we hadn't told them we were a thing yet. "OMG, I thought you were gonna die," Sasuke said, tears welling up in his eyes. "But I knew you wouldn't leave me alone yet," he said as I began wiping the tears from his eyes. "It's okay, Sasu, I'm okay," I said reassuringly, giving him a kiss on the cheek. Sasuke pulled away and held me at an arm's distance as he checked over my body for any injuries. After he was satisfied with my lack of harm, his name was called and he sadly pulled away from me and made his way to the arena. I sat by the railings and sensed Sasuke and Gaara facing across from one another. The announcer yelled begin and Sasuke automatically let off multiple smoke bombs so that the entire battleground was obscured from sight. Before the Chunin exams had started, I had taught Sasuke how to perfectly mask his chakra and how to locate chakra points with accuracy. Gaara stood there and kept trying to attack Sasuke but sending sand in all directions. However, Sasuke was on the walls of the arena and began sending wave after wave of fireballs. Gaara's shields could just about keep up. Then Sasuke made a clone to continue sending attacks and distract Gaara from what the real Sasuke was going to do. Sasuke activated his Sharingan and jumped in front of Gaara, forcing him to be captured in a genjutsu of Sasuke's making. Just like his brother, I thought as I saw the sheer power Sasuke held. Almost rivaling Itachi's. The smoke cleared and everybody saw Gaara, passed out on the ground with Sasuke stood nearby. His clone poofed and the crowd began cheering for Sasuke. Sasuke's parents were amongst the crowd and they had sensed every move Sasuke had made with their Sharingans. Even Itachi had seen what Sasuke had done, and they all looked upon him with pride. They announced Sasuke as the winner and Sasuke released the genjutsu. Gaara jumped up and shook Sasuke's hand, acknowledging the win and admiring Sasuke for beating him. Sasuke then ran up to me and we embraced again, this time Sasuke grabbing me by my hips and me wrapping my legs around his waist as we walk away from everyone else. Sasuke brought us to an empty room somewhere and locked the door behind us. I stare into the cerulean blue eyes of my beautiful kitsune. His eyes mainly look in my direction but they wander as he cannot locate where my own eyes are. The longer I look into his eyes the more I notice scars and markings that don't look natural. Naruto has never really gone into detail as to how he lost his sight or as to how he got so strong. And I don't really want to be pushy and ask. Although I have a vague idea as to how it happened. I twirled a long lock of his golden hair between my fingers and caressed the whisker marks on his cheeks with my other hand. We were cuddling in bed while the party was in full swing just on the other side of the door. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. Maybe we should join them, Sasu, Naruto said, as if he'd read my mind. I nodded, gently lifting Naruto out of bed with me. We rejoined the party. Everyone had shoved the furniture to the sides of the room to make a dance floor, and the kitchen island was covered in snacks and fruit punch. Ino, Choji, Kankuro, Kiba, Tamari, Lee and Ten were all dancing in the middle of the room, and Gaara, Shikamaru, Hinata, Shino and Neji were all hanging around the outskirts of the room, sipping punch and eating snacks. Naruto led me into the center of the dancers and we began dancing together, big grins on both of our faces. After a while a slow song came on and I wrapped my arms around his waist and he wrapped his around my neck, resting his head on my chest as we swayed in time with the music. The night went by as a whirlwind of dancing and having fun, and then suddenly it had to end. Everyone began leaving as the sun came up, leaving Naruto and myself to clear away the mess in Naruto's house. As we began to tidy, there was a small knock on the front door. Naruto didn't move from where he was, but he looked down saddened. I gave him a quick kiss on the top of his head and went to open the door. It was on the latch, so it would only open a small amount. I opened the door to be face to face with the bubblegum locks of our teammate. Just as she was about to say something, I swung the door closed and walked away from the door. "Wait, Sasuke," came the muffled sound of Sakura's plea. She sounded desperate. I opened the door again. "What do you want?" I hissed, pissed off. She flinched, as though my words had actually hurt her. "Can I speak to Naruto, please?" she mumbled, looking down. "Yes." Naruto startled me as he replied from behind me. I moved out of his way so that he could talk to Sakura. He took the latch of and opened the door fully. Sakura dashed at him and embraced him in a hug. "I'm so sorry, Naruto," she sobbed into his shoulder. Naruto strokes her back as she cried. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I treated you so horribly. I'm sorry I was jealous. I'm sorry for all the horrible things I've said and done to you. I'm so sorry," she wailed. "Shush, it's all right," Naruto said reassuringly. He continued to stroke her back. Please forgive me," she said between deep breaths. "Okay, I forgive you, Sakura." With this, Sakura cried even harder. "Come and sit down," Naruto said. "I'll make you some tea." And he gently led her over to the kitchen island, where he placed her onto a chair. He then moved away to make boil the kettle. Sakura calmed down after a while and apologized to both of us again. She said that she'd been horrible and that she was happy that we were together and that she hopes that we can act like a team again. She said she'd also been training really hard so that she can be more helpful on the team. After we drank some tea, she helped us clean Naruto's apartment and then she left. We received the results from the Chunin exams and myself and Naruto has passed with flying colors. As had Shikamaru, Gaara, Shino and Hinata. We received our vests the next day before missions resumed. Afterwards everything settled down. Squad 7 was successful and began undergoing harder and harder missions. Sakura ended off going traveling with Tsunade after Naruto introduced them, and I continued training with Kakashi. Naruto began doing missions alone or with the Anbu until the Hokage entered Naruto into the Jonin exam, which he passed obviously. Kurama just wandered about, however, always keeping in contact with Naruto. From what I heard, he was going around all the Jinchurikis and helping them with their bijus. THSTA all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.